in about a minute. In the meantime, just a couple of housekeeping rules. So stay muted as much as possible, just for background noise purposes. Feel free to use the chat. So if you have any questions, comments, use the chat. In the meantime, also introduce yourself. So say hello. So I see Beth and Rajon, a couple other people already did that. So just where you're dialing in from, and which company you're with. I'm also doing that right now. So feel free to use chat, send it to everyone. And what else is there? Share TechKnowCon with your colleagues, and follow us on LinkedIn primarily. We're also on Twitter, but I think LinkedIn is the main channel these days. And yeah, we're gonna kick this off in about a second. So while you're introducing yourself to your peers via chat, just really quickly about the history. So we started this in 2018. So it's actually Rajon that's going to be speaking today. It was one of the key people behind that. So it was Rajon, myself, and Jenny, who she was at Salesforce at the time. He had this idea that there are people like us that handle learning and development, but for engineers or at technology companies. And our concerns are slightly different than just general purpose learning and development. And so we wanted to kind of get together and share, compare notes and learn from one another. So in 2018, we launched a full day conference at LinkedIn at the time. And it was awesome. 2019, we did it at Twitter. So this photo here was taken at Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. And then COVID hit and we moved to online. So we now do it monthly via Zoom or other mediums like that. So we always look for speakers. So if you have a great story to share, like the one we're going to hear today, feel free to reach out to Tomomi or me and just pitch us your idea. And that's how we source our speakers. Behind the scenes, there's a group of us that run the board basically behind TechKnowCon. So I see Andrew here on the call. I see Jasmine, who stepped down but was on the board for a while. And then there's Chris, formerly at Microsoft, Katie, who I met at Twitter, and Tomomi, who organizes everything, and of course Rajon, who I mentioned already. So that's the team behind the scenes that manages this. Tomomi does most of the work though. We try to create a space that's a safe place for us to get together and share from one another. So be a good citizen, do not solicit, respect each other's privacy. And if you have any questions about the governance and all that, check out techknowcon.io. There's a little bit more on all these items. What TechKnowCon is about is really exploring the space of what we call team enablement. And so it's really a number of activities that we found that we do to enable our technical folks or folks in general. And it ranges from onboarding them to sharing knowledge to providing ways to learn from one another collaboratively, to mentorship and coaching, documentation, and finally metrics and insights so that we can close the loop and understand how things are going. So all these activities combined, we put under an umbrella we call team enablement, because there wasn't an obvious term, but that's roughly the types of conversations we have. And today we're going to be hearing about technical onboarding and probably with some aspects of knowledge sharing and metrics and insights, because I know that's Rajon's favorite topic. So we're going to hear about all of that. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Gail and Rajon in a second. Like I said, I met Rajon long time ago as we were learning from way back when from one another. I think it was at LinkedIn at the time. I was at Twitter. We started learning from one another and change jobs. We both changed jobs in the meantime and then started this community. And Gail has been working with us at Plus Plus as they were launching their technical university at Splunk on Plus Plus. So these are the two speakers, and they're going to share their experience with technical onboarding and other engineering education strategies at Splunk. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Gail and Rajon.
Hello, everybody. Good to see some familiar faces and some new ones. I have to do the good old dance of reorganizing my screen once I share. So just give me 1 second to do that. Amazing. Okay, cool. Yeah, good to see you all. So Rajon and I are going to talk today about instructional engineering at Splunk, and in particular, our onboarding program. So we're going to talk a little bit about what an instructional engineer even is, and go through some cool aspects of our program. And as mentioned, since Rajon does love metrics, we will definitely do that too. Before we start, though, I want to carry on a tradition that Rajon has started, which is to get everybody to share if anyone is hiring, what roles you might have, and if anyone's seeking, what they're looking for, because that is a great way for our community to help each other. So maybe just throw that in the chat anytime between now and the end of the session, and hopefully some connections can be made. All right. So it's a tradition at Splunk as well is that we have something called million data points. We're, a company that makes products for data. And so it is fitting. Here's mine. I won't get into the detail of everything, but a couple of fun things. I do aerial hoop, not usually in a Sailor Moon costume. That was on Halloween, but it's a fun picture, so I include it anyway. I'm in Scouts with my daughter. So in Canada, Scouts is co-ed. We're all in Scouts now, actually, because my son's in Beavers, my daughter's in Scouts. Both me and my husband are Scouters now. So apparently we're a Scout family. But it's fitting because we love camping, as you can see. We love doing outdoor stuff, skiing. My daughter learned to scuba dive in the last couple of years. So 3 out of 4 of us scuba dive now. So tons of fun with our family. And I was previously at Shopify, where actually we did also use ++. So got lots of familiarity with ++ from those days, and then getting to implement it from scratch with Rajon and team here at Splunk, which is very cool. Prior to that, I was in academia for a long time. And yeah, that was at Carleton University, which is in Ottawa as well.
Thanks so much, Gail. And I'll quickly share some of my million data points. I'm a father of 2 daughters, 2 young daughters. Oldest is 10, youngest is 7. 7-year-old recently has been really into things like skateboarding and even recently joined flag football. If you look on the bottom left, that's a picture of Asbury Park, New Jersey. So I was raised in New Jersey, uh, close enough to New York City, where I'm pretty familiar with New York City. On the right of that picture, you'll see my alma mater. So the school I went to is called Stevens Institute of Technology, which is a very small engineering school right across the river from New York City. I am an avid hiker and also avid traveler. So here you see pictures of me and my family. We're hiking Mount Diablo in the Bay Area, as well as another picture of me and my partner visiting Greece last year. As you can see from my background, you could probably tell I'm a big toy collector and musician, big comic book nerd. So here's me and my partner dressing up as Wanda and Vision for a couple Halloweens ago. Also, I played guitar in bands throughout my life. So there's a picture of younger me doing what I used to do. Marco mentioned that we met at LinkedIn. That's the company I spent most of my career in. I spent almost 10 years at LinkedIn, joined Splunk about 2 years ago. So thank you. Pass it back to you, Gail.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm going to do a lot of talking for a while before Rajon gets to jump in and talk about metrics. But I do want to say that Rajon is ready to answer questions in the chat while I'm talking. So definitely feel free to ask as we go along. And hopefully we'll have time for some questions at the end as well. But just in case we don't, I suggest asking as we go. All right, so you kind of get a sense that Splunk is a pretty fun place. Everyone seems to love our slides with our million data points. Let me just tell you a little bit about Splunk as a whole. And just a warning, marketing speak coming in. But I found some good copy that says what we do. So basically, Splunk's purpose is to build a safer and more resilient digital world. So we like to say that we couldn't be prouder of our customers. They keep us all connected. They make cars and our roads safer. They move the financial world forward, and so on and so on. We believe that a safer and more resilient digital world benefits everyone and will lead to a brighter future for all. So we work with the world's leading organizations to help them securely and reliably deliver on their missions and push what's possible. Now, cutting through all the marketing speak, basically that means we have products that focus on security and observability. That's kind of in a nutshell. Splunk, we are a remote first company, and we do have R&D hubs in 3 key regions, North America, Poland, and India. So that's, of course, relevant for our audience as an engineering enablement team. And as you may know, we recently were acquired by Cisco. So now we have this cute little logo that's got the Cisco company added onto it. That closed in March, and we will start more fully integrating in an onboarding process starting around summertime. And I mentioned that because who knows what's going to change by then. So it'll be interesting to see the snapshot of how we do things now before maybe things change or maybe they don't. All right, so I'm going to do something a little bit fun. I have set up a bunch of Slido polls. So what that means is you all are going to either use that QR code or just go straight to slido.com and enter this information. And that's going to bring you to a website. It can be on your desktop that you're watching on. It can be on your phone, whatever works. And you can use that same website for all the different questions that we have, because we'll do different ones throughout the session. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start the first one. You should still be able to see the QR code in the URL. And so this should pop up. And the question I wanted to ask you all is, what kind of roles do you have on your enablement or training teams? Might be program managers, instructional designers, facilitators, engineers, other, maybe all of the above. I don't know. If you're not currently on a team, but have been before, feel free to answer with that in mind. And you should be able to answer more than one, assuming I set it up correctly. Lots of program managers. I've definitely encountered that in the past as well. It's really cool to see how many facilitators you have. For those who are saying facilitators, do you have folks whose like only job is facilitating? Or is it more like, you know, you sometimes have to wear the facilitator hat? Yeah, it's piece of the role. That makes sense. I know at Shopify, we did used to have dedicated facilitators. I don't know what the current state is. That was really cool though, because you could really focus on that as a craft, if you will. Cool. Yeah. So program managers is kind of the one that's, you know, the most popular, which is really interesting. Not really surprised to me. Like, I think that's kind of what I've seen the most too. But it's really cool to see that you have all these other roles as well. Maybe for those who put other, maybe throw that in the chat, what your other role was. And as you're doing that, I'm going to, in about 10 more seconds, so get any additional answers in. Get it in before I switch. All right, so I'm going to switch to the next poll, but just keep putting your other in the chat.
Yeah, Gail, it looks like other might be like systems administrators.
Yeah, that's super cool. We had back at Shopify, as Andrew can attest to, we used to have a whole team dedicated to that sort of thing, all our ed tech and so on. That was pretty sweet. Coordinators as well. Yeah. So our second question that we have up here, we have, how much subject matter expertise does your team have in the domain you're serving? So for example, you know, maybe you serve engineers. You know, what kind of expertise in engineering do you have? Or if you do other domains as well, you can think in terms of the domain you're in. Oh, this is cool. I love seeing how many are saying a fair bit. Yeah, awesome. All right, I'll give it just a couple more seconds to put in any last answers. But this actually, I'm a little bit surprised to see how many have said a fair bit. I think that's super cool. You know, I see sometimes the combination of people with the domain expertise plus learning is a bit of a unicorn skill set, as we're going to talk about. So I love how many people we have that have worked on teams with that. It'd be cool to hear maybe in the chat as we move along, sharing a little bit about, like what kind of expertise they have if you're having that fair bit, right? Is it a past engineer who learned learning design? Are folks going into like figure out like, oh, I'm a learning designer and I want more expertise in this. So they did a course, super curious, where that expertise is coming from. So I'll let you all throw that in the chat. So that poll's going to stay open, but I am going to switch back to my slides. All right. And conveniently, I want to talk about this instructional engineer role, speaking of people who have that dual expertise. So on our team, which is the Engineering Enablement and Engagement team, of which Rajon is the director, and I am a principal instructional engineer. Something super cool, though, is that everybody on our team has a technical background. And all of us have worked as a software engineer at some point in our career, which is very neat. So we do have a mix of roles. So as mentioned, Rajon is our director. We do have a program manager. Sometimes we have a coordinator. This is often through contracting, although I think we probably all wish we could have a full-time coordinator because they're amazing. And we have several instructional engineers. So what exactly is an instructional engineer? So in a nutshell, it means that you have both a technical background and expertise in learning. So our instructional engineers wear different hats depending on need, right? So our skills include learning design, facilitation, program management, strategic planning, maybe even some aspects of coordination, right? Especially when we don't have a coordinator on our team at the time. So depending on our level and our particular strengths, we might specialize more in some of these skills than the others. So instructional engineers or similar roles aren't necessarily that common on technical enablement teams, although this poll result that we just had kind of proved that wrong, right? We actually sound like we have quite a few, which is amazing. But team members, like, a lot of times do have expertise in learning, but not necessarily the technical domain. And you might ask yourself, why is that? So one reason is that, while there are folks with the right skill sets out there, and a lot of them appear to be on this call, in the broader world, it still does seem to be a little bit of that unicorn skill set, right? You often need to hire someone and maybe upskill them in certain areas. So for example, maybe you hire an engineer who's really passionate about learning, but doesn't have any formal background in it. And then, you train them and mentor them so they can learn how to become a learning designer, for example, or a facilitator. But the other consideration I find is definitely salary. So if you want someone with a really strong technical background, there's a good chance that person's going to be used to having an engineering salary, right? And so if your role is offering less than a typical engineer, it can be hard to attract that person. So that's a consideration, right? That said, obviously our team has all instructional engineers type people or similar. We strongly believe that if you can find the right person and you have the budget, it is so worth getting someone with both skills. So I want to share a few reasons why, and maybe have more reasons than I share too. So feel free to pop some more into the chat. But one of them is that, if you have that engineering expertise, let's say, that helps you build trust with your stakeholders, your subject matter experts, and your target audience, right? You sort of almost get like an immediate cachet because, you've been there, you've done it, and you know the terminology, and, you just get that immediate trust. And in addition to that, our relationship with subject matter experts can become a little bit, maybe even more of a partnership, rather than having subject matter experts dictating to us what they need. So for example, we can determine the scope of a learning experience through the lens of what new engineers need, for example, for onboarding, without relying on what a subject matter expert tells us that the scope should be, right? It's also easier if you've been an engineer to understand the learning preferences of the audience, right? So as another example, we can more easily make the call about, should we do documentation versus learning, what training modality it should be, live versus self-paced, all that kind of stuff, because we've lived it. We kind of know the culture firsthand. Our technical and learning expertise allow us to create more on our own before needing help from SMEs, right? So this reduces dependency on those SMEs, right? Allowing us to build learning experiences a little bit more quickly. And honestly, even if it turns out that our first draft isn't in the right direction, that starting point we gave at least will give those SMEs more incentive to contribute, right? Now, having both learning and domain expertise can also allow us to create more effective learning, at least to some extent. How much exactly is an interesting question and something I debate with myself a lot. And I know with a lot of people on the call, we've talked about this too, right? Like how much difference does it make when you have both? You know, and I don't know the answer because I have also seen non-technical folks do really amazing work too. So it's not like it's a strict requirement, but you know, I hypothesize that it does make some amount of difference. There's many examples that you know I can think of that really show how having that expertise helps you take the learning to the next level. So here's one example. In my experience, I have noticed that engineers tend to create, you know, kind of more like handheld walkthroughs, right? Like do this, do this, do this. When they're asked to make, let's say, a workshop or a tutorial or something, right? And sometimes that's fine. But as instructional engineers, we tend to be able to take that format, you know, maybe that walkthrough they started with, and we can kind of shift it to have more active learning and cognitive engagement, right? While still targeting the specific skills to be learned. And we also know how to make use of common misconceptions to deepen the learning outcomes. These things, you know, it might be possible to do without the domain expertise, but it is a lot harder because you don't necessarily know as deeply like what those misconceptions are or, you know, how to cognitively engage on those skills. So here's an example that I've observed in that vein. So, you know, you want an engineer to do a live coding session. So these typically end up being engineers walking through code, narrating what they're doing, hoping those who want to type along can keep up, right? I've seen that many times. So we know that introducing things like little challenges for the audience to try as they go along works wonders. We can introduce mistakes on purpose for the audience to catch, you know, and then try to correct on their own. We can incorporate common misconceptions by purposely implementing them, right? And then showing the consequences, whether it's an error or things just not working as well, and so on and so on. So these are kind of the ways that, you know, we're able to pull that live coding session into something more. That doesn't typically happen unless you have both learning and domain expertise. As another example, you know, we not only understand what the learning objective should be, right, but also how to tell whether an exercise helps develop or demonstrate mastery of an objective, right? So again, you know, maybe we want a programming question that an SME has made, right? We ask them to create a problem, and we can tell whether it's challenging the learner in the right things. This is actually something that I noticed back at Shopify one time. I think I saw Gabby was on the call, so she'll remember this one. But basically, we were making training for React for mobile devs who had to learn React Native, and you know we were putting together some problems for learning how to do JavaScript. And I would ask engineers like, I need a problem statement, you know, with these characteristics, you know. But I want it to be like kind of almost like an assignment problem you would have in school, right? Like I want a problem that they have to solve, but it has to have certain characteristics so I know they're using the skills I want them to use. And what I got back was like, here's a walkthrough on how to do this thing. And I'm like, no. So this is a good example of where you can take that and then, you know, actually yourself turn it into more the problem statement you were looking for. So anyways, all to say, you know, this is going with my hypothesis that we can take things a little bit further with both. And the point of saying all of this is to, you know, help us think about, you know, if we're at a company that could really use one or two folks like that on the team, you know, help convince that the budget is worth it. Doesn't mean they all have to be like that, right? Because like I said, amazing work done by people without the technical background. But I think it's worth the little extra that sometimes this unicorn skill set can cost. All right, so let's talk now about onboarding. And I want to start with us thinking about onboarding should even be trying to achieve. So time for a new question. I'm going to flip over to our Slido and I'm going to advance to the next poll here. All right, so I have here a list of things that, you know, we might feel are important. And, you know, maybe we think they're all important, but I'm going to ask everyone to just try to pick 2 to 3 goals that they think are most important for onboarding. They are hard choices. I agree. So I had to say pick 2 or 3, or everyone would just pick them all, right? All right, these are interesting so far. So technical tools setup is in the lead, and then culture and processes, community and cohort building. And then what's at the bottom so far? So at the bottom, this little hover over is annoying. Go away. Opportunity to commit code. Oh, we have something else's. If you guys want to, if you all want to put something else's, what you were thinking of there in the chat, that would be awesome. This is super interesting. You'll see why I think it's so interesting in a minute too, in terms of this one context. All right, so everyone can keep filling that out if they like. And definitely, oh yeah, so exploring the code base is an example of other. That's a good one. So I wanted to take a moment to use all those goals to give you some of the idea of like what we were hoping to do with engineering bootcamp at Splunk and some of the challenges that we faced, right? Because ideally, like I think everything on that list is important. Like Beth said, like it's hard to choose, you know, but we weren't able to kind of make all of them our priority in the way we might have wanted, right? So again, for context, it might help to remember that I mentioned before, Splunk is a remote first company, right? R&D hubs in 3 different continents. That gives extra challenges like, oh, sometimes we can do live if we want to, but we also have to be able to do self-paced. So challenges like that. Okay, so I want to talk about community building. This is something we had in mind, and honestly, shout out to folks like Kim, who I saw was on the call, for like doing such a good job with community and cohort building back at Shopify. And so that was something that I had in mind. But you know, although we do try to do that in Splunk, we haven't been able to bubble up something like that as much of a priority as I saw it being at Shopify. So you know, when we have a live bootcamp, we do have a wrap-up session, for example, where we share our learning. But there's potential to do so much more, right? To try to build that community. And it's really interesting too, because we you know, we have channels, for example, where we try to engage people, but for whatever reason, the culture just doesn't really engage with us in our bootcamp channels. So it's mostly shouting into the void. So, you know, one day it'll be cool to make that more of a priority, but it hasn't been, you know, the top that we've been able to tackle yet. Culture is an interesting one too, because that was showing up really high in our poll as well. It's a tricky one though, right? As we're going to kind of see it in a few cases, a theme at Splunk is that we have a whole bunch of different teams in several different product lines who all kind of operate differently. We don't have a central set of engineering principles, for example, or like expectations. So it can be really hard to define and share what the culture is, right? So we did make an attempt. Our first attempt was to use it as a chance to ask the new hires, you know, what have you seen before? And here's some things that we've learned from talking to engineers here, and kind of bring up some ideas there. And that worked pretty well. But something we've been doing lately is that, you know, one of our engineering leaders kind of took that idea and turned it into a presentation from them, as well as them sharing, you know, what they've seen at Splunk. And they've been presenting in our live boot camps now. So that's actually been a really cool way to do it. And even when, you know, even when a leader is like, if they're too busy or we're unable to get one live, you know, we still have the recordings from the previous time they spoke. And so that's been really impactful, actually. So that's generally how we've been treating culture so far. One day we do hope to have standardized engineering principles or values, though. That's something our team is hoping to work on. All right, so product knowledge. So Splunk, if you're not familiar with it, you've never played with Splunk Enterprise, for example, it's a highly technical product, right? Many engineers coming into the company haven't necessarily used it or even worked in the domain that the products are in that they're working on, right? So for example, I mean, even back in my day at Shopify, like there were Shopify people who were trying really hard to teach us about Splunk. And I remember always being lost. So that gives you a good example. But you know, if you're working on observability products or security products, maybe you've never worked in a place that incorporated security or observability practices, or not a team at least that dealt with it, right? So it takes a little while to become familiar with the products that we have and the types of customers that we have and so on. So we do actually dedicate a fair bit of time to that, which is interesting because it was lower down in the poll. But I will say, I also remember from Shopify days, there was a lot of time dedicated to understanding who the customers and products were. So I was always inspired by that too. Okay, so here's an interesting one. We are big believers in trying to give a technical or systems view of what I've coined our product ecosystem. The idea there is that we're trying to give the right level of abstraction, some kind of systems view of all the different things around Splunk and how they connect together. But getting that right level of abstraction is not easy. Just talking about the products and how they work isn't enough. But going really deep into architecture diagrams that engineers who work on the teams look at, that's too much. That's so much detail right away, right? So how do you get that right level of abstraction? That's number one. Number two is we didn't have any kind of diagram existing that was even close to giving us all the information we needed to put this together. So we had to go out and create one. Because what you have is you have people in their individual areas who are super knowledgeable about that area, but they don't know the whole picture. It's like nobody knows the whole picture, right? So that's another interesting kind of use of, teams like ours. And I guess, again, it helps that we have engineering background, but being able to actually create that diagram from scratch and then just making sure everybody feels like it's accurate is super helpful. And yeah, it's, I can't show you the full diagram because we weren't sure IP-wise, but you'll see, I'm going to be showing a little bit of a session that we do around this diagram. So you'll get a little peek at the kinds of ways that, that we did put that together. So that'll be in a little bit. Okay, tool setup. Also, I think that was high on the list of our poll, right? But this is a challenge for us, right? When it comes to setting up technical tools and committing code and all that kind of stuff. Like we said before, Splunk has a lot of autonomy to do the things that works best for them, right? All the different teams. So there isn't a whole lot that we can bubble up, right? To the all engineers level. This is a big contrast to, my experience at Shopify where it made sense. You could teach everyone Rails because the back end was always Rails. The front end was always Rails. Like there was a little bit more consistency, but here, like everybody's doing things a little bit differently, or maybe a lot differently. So while we try to find ways to show examples of how things are done, we also we have to make sure this is covered kind of after they're with us, right? So at their team level, whether that means the team onboarding material, the managers, or maybe like their onboarding buddies, right? And so this is why ensuring our managers set up new hires for success and that we have an effective onboarding buddy program is so important, right? Like we can't do all the things because all the things are too different. So we can do some top level stuff and bubble up and abstract where we can, but we really need those managers and buddies to fill in the gaps, right? And so that's a big piece. And this is an area that we've been working on and are planning to work on to improve even more to make sure that we have good buddy systems set up. All right, so with all these goals and challenges in mind, I'd like to share about the broad architecture of how we approach onboarding. At the end, I'm going to ask a question. It's going to be a little more freeform in the poll about what's similar and different from what you all have seen. So pay attention and see what you might write in that question in a moment. It's kind of like a test, but not really, All right, so the way it works is we have this first week that we call Engineering Bootcamp. This is going to be where we do, like I was saying before, bubble up what we can, what can be abstracted a little bit more, before you have to get into more team level. So we do have a welcome and culture session. I did talk a little bit about what that looked like. So, trying to get a cohort together, trying to get them to know each other. In the live sessions, we do usually do an icebreaker that has been really fun. And we, either have a discussion about culture ourselves or have that engineering leader. Then we do voice of the customer. Now, this is interesting because our broad corporate Splunk onboarding doesn't get super deep into what Splunk does, its products, who its customers are. It kind of touches on it, but it's not very deep. So we felt we needed to go a little bit further because, it was really difficult to kind of really understand that unless you've experienced Splunk before, right? So I felt it when I came in. It took me like a month or two to understand why Splunk was interesting and special as a product. So I wanted to try to help make that happen a little faster. So voice of the customer essentially is, getting to know the products, reading, getting to experience some customer stories, that kind of thing. And I tried to find customer stories as well that were kind of inspiring, right? Like doing good in the world. An example was, showing the fact that the Splunk platform can pull in data sources from many different places and you can make use of it without having to put it in a particular schema or anything. There was a story about an organization that used it to stop human trafficking because it needed data from cell phones, from internet, like all these different places to start to see patterns and try to find examples of human trafficking and help stop them. So those are the kind of stories I really wanted to pull in to really show the power of what our products really are all about. And then interestingly, the Splunk platform, although a lot of folks who work in security and observability might think, why do I have to learn about this? I'm working on a different product. It's interesting because when you ask engineers later, after onboarding, what do you wish you could have learned? A big piece of it is like, I wish I had time to learn about the platform, but now since I'm not working on it, I know I don't have time. And it is kind of the base of a lot of what we do. Not everything builds on top of it, but a fair bit does, or it will more and more over the future. So we felt based on that, it was important to give a really good introduction to the platform itself. Not all products get quite as much spotlight right now as the platform does. We're hoping to add a little bit more of the other products, but that was a big piece of why we wanted to really highlight that one. We do have a great little session about our technical history, which includes, all the attempts in the past we've tried to get into the cloud and why they didn't work. So that's always fun. And this one is nice because it can just be a nice little recording. You don't need to deliver it live each time. And so that's been a really popular one as well. The product ecosystem one I mentioned, which I'll give you a super quick tour of in a moment. We do try to cover our software development lifecycle with all the challenges coming from what I said before. Everyone does something differently, right? And so, we do our best to try to give some kind of story about how everyone does everything and give them a starting point for how to understand what their team might do, knowing that we do have to have them continue the specifics in their own team onboarding and with buddies and so on. Then we do have some deep dives. Luckily, we're able, we created our own platform deep dive course, which is self-paced, but we were able to make use of another self-paced course that customers can even use, a really nice one that introduces the security domain in our products. And we have our colleague named Snehangshu, who joined recently in India. He's been working on some observability deep dives. So Ollie means observability. So that's really super cool too. So that's week one of Bootcamp, but we consider onboarding to take 45 days. Probably more, but that's when we start asking them how their onboarding went again. So I've mentioned the buddy program and how important that is. So that's a really big piece of it. We also create team tracks and other resources. So, some teams take care of their own stuff and we try to support them, but sometimes they come and ask us, hey, can you help us curate and put together a team track? By track here, we do mean ++ track. So they do get auto-assigned, for example, to folks who are joining a particular organization. Like I said, a lot of teams have their own resources as well. We have additional learning programs, like for people who are learning more about the platform, for example, we did create a platform foundations course to go even deeper than you did before. And we also created a program to learn about how to do apps for the platform, because, for example, even some of our security products are actually platform apps. So that's a big area that that people can use to onboard as well. And I mentioned first code merge here just because thinking about how fast it takes to get their first code merge, this is one of our metrics that Rajon will get to talk about later, but it's a key thing to try to support and see how we can get them there faster. Okay, whew. I promised I was going to ask you what similarities and differences there are. So let me pop over to that. This one is a free text, so you can type in whatever you want. So yeah, if you can throw that into our Slido here, would love to see what things y'all have noticed. Oh, I totally said I was asking a question that is not the question that's on here, but I think you get to run the ball and answering it correctly. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so the question I actually have up here is, what are your biggest challenges when designing a domain-specific onboarding program? So, hey, perfect. Maybe I'll skip the similarities and differences one, and maybe some of you are answering that anyway. This is awesome though. So we see some things like customizing content for roles and levels, getting SMEs involved, ensuring content is up to date as technology changes, scaling given our team size. Oh yes, and the number of engineering orgs. Our team is 5 people right now, so I get that. Siloed engineering teams using different technology stacks. That sounds familiar. Preventing knowledge bottlenecks or spreading SMEs out. Meeting the needs of a variety of learners, roles and job level particularly. Yeah, it's a good one. Lack of support for engineering leaders to protect engineer time to participate. It's a good one. What people need depends on their level of expertise in a domain. Finding the right level can be hard. Yeah, we kind of err on the side of beginners often, or at least that's a habit I have. That can be tricky. Balancing headcount and bandwidth challenges. Yeah, so much good stuff here. Content changes too fast to keep up with. This is amazing. Yeah, so I see a lot of similar challenges as what we had, which is awesome. Well, not awesome, but it makes me feel better. But it's awesome because now as a community, we can get together and talk about it, right? Maybe this is a call to like, I think there may be having onboarding channels probably in the TechKnowCon Slack. So if anyone's not in the TechKnowCon Slack, maybe someone can throw a link in to how to get into it. And we should help each other, right? Let's solve some of these problems. All right. So feel free to keep adding stuff there because you all can kind of look at it afterwards. I'm sure we can share out some of the answers too later, which would be really interesting. I wanted to super fast just give you a couple of previews of how we're doing things. I do want to leave a little bit of time for Rajon to talk about metrics. So just for fun, I have a little quiz for you. So we're just going to take a second to do this one. So I'm going to pop this to the next question here. All right. Which of the following statements do you think is not true? So which one is not true? I feel like I should have done the thing where I hid the answers. Bye, guys. I should have hid the answers until we had a few in there, but It's really interesting to see that we have 2 that folks are guessing are not true, and a 3rd one everyone thinks is true. That's intriguing. All right, I think we probably have everyone answered. Okay, so everyone thinks that the first one is the one that's not true. Not everybody, the 2/3 of us, let's say. Instructor-led training is generally more effective than anything you can do self-paced, and that's competing with, there's no such thing as too many times when it comes to giving info. So our answer is, in fact, yes, that instructor-led training generally being more effective. We consider that not necessarily true. You know, that said, it does take a lot of effort, right, to make self-paced training good. And if you can do it live first, that can be quicker to get it going and can really help you test your designs quicker. That's actually another lesson I learned back in Shopify. So this is the one that I would have picked too. The next one, the no such thing as too many times when it comes to giving info about onboarding. And this is the one that, you know, even if you know it to be true, you still have to like say it 10 more times before they remember. It's funny because like, and I'll show you our plus track super briefly in a second, but it's like, oh, you try to tell them about how everything's there in the track and here's how it works. And don't forget there's this, and this there, and like, just keep going with it. They still at the end in their feedback say, well, I wish we had something on this that is right in the track. Anyway, so you can never tell them too many times. I'm interested that nobody picked the last one. So that means we have some pretty good learning experts here. So this is a technique I use often, quizzing before they're instructed on a topic. Here's my example. I actually give them an ecosystem quiz, not an easy one, at the beginning of our product ecosystem session. And I tell them, you know, research shows that if you do the quiz first, you'll learn it better. And we still get people who are like, say in the feedback, why are you doing this quiz before I knew anything? That's stupid. But
I'd like to add that Gail actually implemented this technique recently to 2,000 Cisconians. So even with a large audience, it works.
I did, yeah. So you're always going to get a few in the feedback who just like didn't listen to the explanation and didn't believe in it. That's fine. But most people were like, oh yeah, that did really help. So you give this quiz at the beginning, they know nothing, they make guesses, and then you give it at the end and they're like, ooh, look how much more I know now, right? So yeah, that was definitely a thing we did. And it's a proven technique. We talk about it a lot in some of our reading clubs that I know some of us are here in. Okay, cool. So I did want to just, like I said, super briefly show how we use ++ because the metric stuff is really cool. So I want Rajon to be able to talk about that. And heads up, we are heading to not having time for Q&A, so make sure to keep asking in the chat. Don't wait till the end. But yeah, so in ++, we implement both live and self-paced bootcamp right here in tracks. So again, you'll see there's lots of information here that people will just ignore probably in a lot of cases. So you can't tell them too many times. To help with that, actually, I made this first task here, which is a tour of engineering bootcamp to try to make them actually see like, here's how you do it. And like, here's the sections and here's how you mark progress. Anyway, so yet another time. And they hear it in live too. They hear it from this facilitator over and over. Anyways, so yeah, so you can kind of see an overview here. We kind of organize it into days. It's more or less following a schedule. We have a mix of videos, tasks. We have some courses as well. So, we used to just have video recordings of live sessions for things like our product ecosystem, but we've since turned that into a self-paced course in Rise as well, so that you have a little bit of a nicer experience. And yeah, so that kind of is how we do that. We also have our live in here too, and we use scheduled tracks. So if anyone hasn't seen that, you create your track with your events, and then you can schedule them and make a nice cohort. So you can see down here, we have one coming up in May, and we just turned on our Slack integration, so it can make Slack cohort channels automatically. And when you enroll, it enrolls them in the Slack, and that's amazing. So I'm so excited to try that out for our May cohort. So yeah, so it's the same kind of idea, except some of these things are live events, but some of them are still tasks and videos and so on, but it looks very similar. And just to give a little idea of how we get things into our self-paced, we do use Rise, and we have the same kind of activities that we might do. So this one is actually copying this activity slide deck, which gets them to make guesses before they know things once again, but have some resources to look them up. This is a part of our ecosystem, and this is one of the activities that they have to do. Okay, so I'm sure I could talk a lot more about that. if anyone is
I'd also like to add that Gail also did this kind of activity with
yeah.
2,000 Cisconians, and it was super successful. So just wanted to add that.
Woo! Yeah. So yeah, I wish I could talk about this in more depth, but I really want Rajon to be able to talk a bit about metrics. So
well, I'm going to propose something because I mean,
yeah.
there's only 5 minutes left, and I could talk forever about this. I know that I did a metrics talk about 2 years ago, but a lot of that talk was based on my experience at LinkedIn. Now being at Splunk for 2 years, I have learned a lot more. So here's a proposal, maybe to Marco and Tomomi, if we can do a part 2 of this, and I can have more dedicated time to talk about metrics. I know it's not the most exciting thing that a lot of learning professionals like to engage in, but it is very important, especially in terms of adding business value and demonstrating business value. So what do you folks think? I personally think that Q&A is very important and a way for us to engage with the folks that attended. So let's do a part 2 at another time. We'd be more than happy to schedule with you, Tomomi.
Yeah, it looks like there's appetite, so that's perfect. Do we want to give any kind of quick preview, or do you want to save the surprise for next time?
I'll save the surprise. Yeah, there's only about 5 minutes left, so I think it'd be good to have some Q&A.
I love it. All right, let me stop sharing then so you can see our faces. Cool. All right, yeah, let's do Q&A then.
All right, any questions? Feel free to type in the chat or just ask. I also shared that, I believe I shared the right article. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rajon, but the one where you shared metrics at LinkedIn.
And there's the more recent one too that he did. So there's 2.
Oh, okay, got it.
He's our metrics superstar.
I talk too much about metrics.
Great topics.
Rajon, there's a good question from Andrew. What objections have we bumped into related to having instructional engineers? Or have you? I feel like you did a good job advocating for it, so.
Yeah, one of the most challenging things, and I'm speaking more from a hiring manager perspective, is honestly the cost of hiring folks that do have strong engineering background. So having that conversation can be rather challenging, especially when the perception of hiring an L&D team is typically lower. So if you're able to justify with a lot of the points that Gail presented in her presentation, I think that those points go a long way as far as justification. Especially, and what they love to hear too is the fact that you don't need to spend SMEs don't need to spend so much time creating training, because they're more expensive than folks on an enablement team.
Cool. I think Kim had a hand up.
Yeah. Hi, Gail. Gail and I used to work at Shopify together. It's good to see you. One of the pieces you touched on, and I think I saw a lot of submissions around, was how do you navigate all the new hires and the learners coming from different backgrounds, different roles, different levels of experience? I feel like it's one of the toughest nuts to crack when it comes to onboarding. So I'd love to hear just your philosophy around what content is for everybody and what is more appropriate to be more role specific.
Yeah, I think we almost get around that to some extent for free by the fact that we can't get too deep into your team specific stuff in our kind of high level onboarding. So in the sense of assuming whether they know Git already and all that kind of stuff, we don't necessarily, we have all kinds of resources for people who need it that kind of end up being shared sort of after the boot camp. Whereas the boot camp, a lot of it is hey, let's talk about the products. And then with those sort of sessions, nothing is mandatory. We're careful never to say you have to come to anything. So technically someone could kind of opt out of something, but so far I have noticed personally that even like all the way up to like the directors sometimes who come to our onboarding, they all seem to enjoy getting that chance to get hands-on with the products and talk about that. And then, trying to find ways to encourage them to take the opportunity to mentor the others who are there, right? Like if they know something, they can share their expertise. And we've had that happen too, right? Like in the Intro to Splunk platform, we've had people who were really deeply knowledgeable about it, and they were able to help by the fact that it was a really interactive session, right? They could help answer questions and provide even more color than I could to certain things. But that's kind of where I'd start answering that question. Would you add anything, Rajon?
I think you just hit the nail on the head.
Perfect.
Thank you, Bill.
It's such a good question, though. It's such a hard problem in some cases. Yeah. I'm just trying to see if there's any other questions in here. Oh, how do you ensure that you stay up to date on the tech you're onboarding for, and what level of say would your team's research have on bringing new tech stacks? Ooh, that's a good one. I feel like, Rajon, you should probably answer to the second one. Staying up to date on the tech you're onboarding is interesting. It's more about, I'm finding personally, like in all the stuff I've done, it's more about just knowing how to use the product. Which luckily for me, it doesn't change super quickly. It's not like the days of Shopify where like they merged like 100 times a day. It's more like you have a release every 6 months or whatever, especially for the enterprise software. That's not true in products, but yeah. So, basically like I kind of like deep dive and specialize in something when I know I have to work on something for it, but I don't worry about knowing all the things all the time because it's just impossible.
Yeah, Gail, I think that's good for product knowledge related topics, in terms of tooling and workflow and infrastructure. I mean, one of the biggest things is communication is hard, right? And so even if tooling changes internally for engineers, it's easy to miss. Don't have a great suggestion. I mean, the things that we do is stay vigilant, especially in terms of specific Slack channels. So those things, I think the team does a good job, especially if they're more vigilant in specific channels than others, to share that back with the rest of the team and have them know to update something. Besides that, one thing that we do have at Splunk is a bi-weekly tech demos. And so we also keep our eye on any new things that are happening within our bi-weekly tech demos.
And Rajon, another thing probably worth mentioning too is something that you started when you joined Splunk is setting up a steering committee, which was really great because what that was finding leaders from different product lines and making sure all the areas were represented. And they essentially became our stakeholders, which is really great because I remember, back at Shopify, like who our stakeholders were in engineering was never really clear. So it's kind of like we just kind of sometimes had to use our own judgment. So it's been really nice having a really clear set of people who agree, yeah, we're going to help make sure everything's up to date. You can come ask us for help. We can give you feedback, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, just want to add on, steering committee has been super helpful. Folks that consist of our steering committee are either senior principal plus, so in some other companies that's also known as senior staff plus, or director plus. And these are folks, as Gail mentioned, represent different parts of the company or engineering. But not only are they our stakeholders, but they're also our advocates for their own organizations. And so they help amplify the things that we're trying to do and the programs that we run within their own organizations as well.
Cool. I think we're a little over time now, eh? So.
Yep. Any other questions? Any final questions, or are we good? So okay, so it sounds like we're going to schedule metrics as a separate conversation, and yay, super looking forward to that. Thank you both. Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Rajon, and awesome talk. And we'll continue the conversation on TechKnowCon Slack as well. And as always, we'll transcribe this and post it and share it, and you'll get all the artifacts as well. So thank you all. Great to see everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.